Hey, Wiz, today we're going to start building our very own ChatGPT. Are you excited for this series, dude?
I couldn't be more excited. We're trying to recreate the experience of ChatGPT with OpenAI's technology. Isn't that what a future we live in?
The best, the best. Yeah, we're coming up on 3 years, the Chativersary, let's say November 2022. And I think a lot of people, especially today, and rightly so, underestimate all that goes into ChatGPT. So today we're going to break down sort of what the key features and components are, and we'll give people some insight into all of the back end stuff that's really going on. It's still the same old chat interface, but that's just the interface. Behind the scenes, that's where most of the magic happens. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to use the models, we're going to use their APIs, we're going to go over all of this, but we're going to effectively use those tools to recreate the experience, to show people how it's happening behind the scenes, or at least, as far as we can tell, given the technology that we have access to, just in order to see how complex these stacks really are, and how, the words like we used to say kind of in like a meme or a dismissive way, like hey, it's just what ChatGPT can do. But these days, ChatGPT is doing a whole lot.
It's doing a whole lot, and it really is a very, very multi-agent system behind the scenes here. Like, insofar as we have access to build stuff as developers through APIs, we're going to build everything we can from the ground up. It starts in this session. This is the kickoff, part 1. Today we cover like the core program from whence all else will come. And it's actually quite simple. You're contained in a notebook today. Isn't that right?
This is an introduction to the tool we will use to build something with greater complexity.
That's right.
For right now, we're still locked in the notebook. It's easy breezy.
That's right.
But we have to ease in. We got to dip our feet in before we really start quickly accelerating beyond just a notebook.
Yeah. So it's kind of like we went to the store, we bought a plant in a planter, and we're gonna sort of bring that back and start growing a garden here soon enough. Okay. All right. Beautiful, Wiz. Well, I'm excited for the discussions today. Even though it's an introductory topic, there's a lot of really fun, interesting, agentic things happening in the industry that we get to highlight. Revisiting classic core concepts and code, one of our favorite things to do. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off. We'll see you back in a bit. All right. And with that, we are pumped to kick off part 1. Prompting, should we even call it that anymore? And the responses API. This is going to allow us to have the glue that we need to connect our very own ChatGPT application together. This is the first of many sessions to come on how to build your very own ChatGPT in 2025. So thanks for joining us today. If you're a beginner, welcome. If you're a super advanced user, we hope you enjoy digging into the core concepts and code at the edge in 2025 as much as we do. If you want to jump in on any discussion or conversation topic, please do it directly in the YouTube live chat or in a comment on your viewing platform. And with that, let's kick this thing off, everybody. How to build ChatGPT part 1, prompting and the responses API. So because this is the very first of our sessions on how to build ChatGPT, we want to really outline the breadth and scope of this series for you first. And that'll allow us to get started building the core of what will become our back end. We want to understand the responses API and its lineage, starting with the chat completions API. We want to understand how to, let's say, prompt engineer our application in the age of agents. And of course, Wiz will come in and give us the demo we need to really get started. So first, a quick overview of really the product, ChatGPT, more than this series. We'll then talk about the OpenAI API, known world round by AI engineers building, shipping, and sharing their own unique applications. And then we want to really dig into not just prompting best practices that everybody knows already, but more specifically, we want to take a look at some of the developer prompting best practices that we'll need to build a truly agentic ChatGPT today using some of the latest models that we have access to. Okay, so first let's take a look at ChatGPT. This is the classic interface. This is from our business account here at AI Makerspace. What's on your mind today? The classic chat. Well, if you click this little plus button right here, you'll see that you get access to a bunch of different stuff. And if we could kind of take a closer look at this, maybe zoom in a bit, we can start to see that like there's actually a lot going on. For instance, if I want to just add some files, a little file search action, boom. We might call that some retrieval augmentation of our prompt or our context that we're putting in before I send it to the model. But that's not the only place we see RAG here. In fact, all of these connectors are also RAG. And of course, some of them are a little bit more business oriented on this business account. Some of them make things a little bit easier than just basically doing plain old RAG. But they're all under the umbrella of RAG. This will be sort of a focus of our second session. How do we build these sorts of features? And then we might talk a little bit about agents. Now, one of the things that we don't even see on here is that there is an agentic search capability built in. We don't have to sort of tell ChatGPT to use the internet. We used to at one point in time, but now it's baked in that we can do internet searches, we can retrieve information, we can get current information, and we can add that to our context before we send it to the model. But of course, that's not the only place agents come into play. Agent mode, of course, is glaring here. And what does that even mean? Well, that actually means a lot, as we'll see. It's not just agentic reasoning. It's like true multimodal computer use and a lot of other really nuanced agentic things going on to put that together. It sort of stacks up with a few releases that OpenAI has come out with in recent months and years. And of course, there's deep research, which is maybe the most successful multi-agent application of 2025, certainly to date across all big model providers, and has become a bit of a mainstay in any application that we might pick up off the shelf and use, any competitors to ChatGPT. But it goes on, right? We have pictures, we have the Canvas sort of more interactive user interface that maybe as developers we don't use as much, but that is quite interesting to check out, to learn about, and to actually see just how old this feature is. Of course, Study and Learn was just released heading into this school year. Study mode, as you know, universities around the world have to deal with the fact that kids are going to keep using ChatGPT, and so are university professors. And this is just within the little plus, right? So, I mean, this is just all the stuff that's hidden within the actual chat bar, and it's not even all the stuff. We can zoom back out. We can think about the selection up top that we might be familiar with, how we can select different models. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit here and take a closer look. If we want to be able to select models, how do we do that exactly? And how do we have the model decide on selecting reasoning versus non-reasoning, how is that connected to the types of agents we might be leveraging elsewhere within this chat interface? How might we think about leveraging different LLMs, or, even just engaging directly with voice? This was released last week, and as part of our mastermind session we do internally at AI Makerspace, we talked about the real-time API voice updates, and Wiz demoed them for everybody. There's just so much going on. I mean, even zooming back out, you can kind of look up in the corner here, and you can see that you can kind of do that incognito chat. You can kind of turn off the temporary chat here. There's so many things. And Wiz, I just want to have a quick discussion about this. We had initially outlined the series as like a 7-parter, but as I was preparing today's session, as we were talking more about this, there's images and canvas and study mode and real-time voice and memory. And what about the stuff that's going to be released next week? We don't even know about. There's going to be a lot of sessions. How many of these are really necessary for most people building most things? Are they going to have some subset, some very small subset of these features? Is this more just for the big model providers that you would want to do this? Or are we starting to see production applications that look more and more like ChatGPT every day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because the answer is subset, for sure. Like, you don't need to build all of ChatGPT. Like, not everything is trying to be the everything app, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind. But what's also important to keep in mind is that we have the ability to build all of this, right? And so I think, kind of walking through what is possible just with a very limited on Rails set of tools, right? It's exponentially more than what was possible when we did our first Chativersary, right? And we were super excited that you could just talk to the model and it wouldn't always lie. I think this is the kind of progression, right? Yes, you'll only take a subset of these things, but you can do all of it. And that's something that, and as you can see, you can do, as you will see over the course of our many sessions, you can do all of it relatively low lift for each individual component. Tying it all together is integration hell exists and it's real, right? But you can do each of these things, and it's a single 1-hour session and you can get her done.
That's right. That's right. I mean, realistically, we're seeing a lot about the workforce and layoffs every day. What was it? Salesforce today. It's like, we can do more with, like, it's almost maybe the best thing you could even put on your resume today. If you want to be a developer, it's like, I built my own ChatGPT. Check it out. This is part of the reason that we want to do this and sort of give this as a resource to the community, because being able to do this and then requiring it to be done as a product are two different things that are serving different goals. And I think it's important to sort of distinguish. For engineers to be able to do this, I mean, this is what makes you the big dollar dues today, right? I mean, this is the stuff.
Well, it's like, if you could do this whole subset of things, right? If you could do every individual core component, the kind of implication there is that there's not many things you're going to not be able to rise to the challenge of, right? And so when companies are looking for people, especially in the AI space, we hear over and over again with the MIT study and with the this and that study and with people talking about how to stay relevant in the age of AI, like flexibility and adaptability are one of the key things that that people need and people are looking for. And, being able to do all of this, it helps put the proof in the pudding, right? That you are adaptable, that you can, you create what needs to be created, not just
that you can build, ship, and share like a legend.
Like a legend.
And get paid to do it. Hopefully creating tons of value for your company, tons of value for you as well along the way. Okay, so I mean, this isn't, as we're going to break it down, this isn't super complex although each individual thing, if we go deep enough into the models, if we go deep into the technology, it's gonna, but we're building here. And this is sort of meant to mimic building of real applications when they need these types of features, as more and more applications will need in the many months and years to come.
Okay. That's the one. That's the one.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and introduce our very first topic, Wiz, and we'll see back in just a bit for discussion. So where does the story begin? The story begins, guys, with the OpenAI API, or formally, we might call this the OpenAI Chat Completions API. Now, for those of you that have been in the game for a while, you might have been familiar with the March 2023 terminology, the System User Assistant Role terminology. For those of you getting in the game just now in 2025, you can go ahead and forget about that system role, because as of 2025, we're talking about the developer role. This is the age of development of so many of these AI applications. And this is where you, as the developer, are going to be doing a lot of work to set the context and set the vibe and set really the behavior of your applications. So here's the big idea with the Chat Completions API. We want to pass a list of messages that are identified by their role and the message content. The role is the key new feature here. Then we want to return the next message from the AI. This is going to have the role of assistant. So we're going to return, generally streaming token by token in a really nice, sort of easy to read way, an output, a response. So we're going to do a request. We're going to do a response. So this is a message-based HTTP interface, very classic, that all developers are familiar with. This is where OpenAI started. And it's important to keep this in mind always, because it's just a natural evolution of building software. OpenAI kind of codified it in this developer user assistant setup. So let's dig into this chat style model syntax. Again, instead of just a list of content and a list of messages, we have instead a role that allows us to put in a list of chat messages with different roles, for instance, developer or user, and then output just another chat message. And so we can see developer role, we can see user role, and there's going to be 3 different roles in general, as mentioned. Developer, this is setting the vibe. This is setting the high-level instructional context. This is setting the behavior and the flavor of your LLM. This is where you can do a lot of work. You can't really do much work on what the user puts in. You can, of course, test it like you're a user, and you can sort of act like the AI, providing example outputs, but you can't really take the place of the AI, the LLM yourself. It's going to be important to really dial in your developer prompt, your system level prompt. And this is what we see in the OpenAI docs. These are your instructions. These are prioritized. These are the high level priority things that we're going to focus on first. The user is just engaging. That's the user. The assistant is either generated directly by the model or could be examples that you provide. Now, also in 2023, OpenAI extended their chat completions API to a couple of different things. They first came out with the function calling API. And this was pretty cool because they said they actually took the models and fine-tuned them to both detect when a function needs to be called and to respond with an appropriate JSON message that is going to allow us to call that function. And this was pretty cool because this didn't really exist before. We could say, please return JSON mode. And that kind of worked, but it didn't work all the time. And so we actually had to fine tune models to be really good at function calling. In fact, a few months later, 5 months later in November, OpenAI released JSON mode because of the very fact that this sort of more general JSON mode wasn't always working with a simple prompt. So presumably this is another fine-tuned model. Now, importantly, while function calling returns JSON mode, it's not the same as JSON mode. JSON mode is going to be useful outside of function calling. And more generally, we can think about having a specific type of output, having a structured output that we can know and define and rely on. This is going to be a key to building applications in the future. So if we go back to the big idea of request response, we can think about tool and function calling very simply. It introduced this chat completions API, introduced first-class tool and function calling, as well as very nicely convenient structured outputs. So what we did is, as the developer, we're sort of providing some information to that fine-tuned model. We're providing a function, get weather, and we're sort of providing a natural language unstructured input. That model is then going to notice this is asking for some function calling. It's going to quickly change our unstructured input into structured input. And I'm going to send back everything I need to be able to, on the developer, on the app side, not within the model now, actually execute that function with the appropriate format required as input to the function, which came out of the model. That will then come back with some structured output that we can convert back into unstructured conversational flow with the user. And we can finally get the response of, oh, you want to know the weather in Paris? Here's the weather in Paris. Now, this function calling sort of 5-step process here is non-trivial by itself, and it's really great that it's sort of totally baked in. And we've talked about this many times before. It's kind of reasoning and action in one step, and there's all this good stuff. But what we want to kind of focus in on here to round out the chat completions API discussion is we can kind of look at we're fundamentally leveraging some structured outputs here. We're fundamentally leveraging that JSON output. So all this is contained in 2023, and only in 2025, I think, are people really starting to, really, like, people that are just now getting into the field. They're starting to come into this with an agentic point of view, where something like this is quite important, where we're calling tools and functions all the time. Speaking of tools, this was one of the key features added in the OpenAI Assistants API. And this came out at the same time as that JSON mode, at least V1 beta. V2 beta wasn't dropped until April 2024. And the Assistants API is basically, look at this. It's going to allow us to build AIs. We called them assistants at the time. Nobody kind of called them agents at that time. They uses OpenAI's models, access files, maintain persistent threads, and call tools. So we've got file retrieval, RAG. We've got tool calling, kind of agents. And we can define a thread very simply. A thread is literally the convo between the assistant and the user. It's a session. And so we can start to think about this idea of a kind of session memory and beyond session memory, and lots of kind of things at that time. And it was very simple how to use this. We wanted to create our assistant. We wanted to create the thread. We wanted to add messages, just like Chat Completions API. And we wanted to run our assistant on that thread. Importantly, there were a couple of key tools added. And we'll see sort of, echoes of this in the user interface today that we already looked at. We had code interpreter, we had retrieval or RAG/file search, and we had function or tool calling. And so we can kind of think about how a user wants to interact with our assistant. In this nice little image here, the user's message: how much should I contribute to my retirement plan? This is the personal finance bot. You should contribute something, 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 based on all of these tool calls, thread conversation management. In the simplest case, it's just sort of one function or tool call, and I'm getting back a specific response that helps me out to answer the user's query. So I can kind of imagine the user only sees this in a similar way to how the classic chat completions API, the user only really sees this. And really, they don't even see this. This is for us as developers. So we can really start to root ourselves in what things were like heading into 2025, the year of agents, where the Responses API was released in March. And this was released as part of the new tools for building agents release blog. And so this was part of the Agents SDK. And the Responses API was kind of the core of it, though. As they said in the release, our new API primitive for leveraging OpenAI built-in tools to build agents. And they go on to say that it combined the simplicity of chat completions with the tool use capabilities of the Assistants API. So now, with the Responses API, with a single Responses API call, developers can solve even more complex things, even more tool calls, function calls, even more turns of the model, even more conversation turns, even more threads, even more sessions, even more stuff. Because they mentioned at the time, and I mean, this wasn't that long ago, right? This was 6 months ago. As model capabilities continue to evolve, we believe the Responses API will provide a more flexible foundation for building agentic applications. And during that release, they noted that there's even more tools, one of which arguably, should have been put in a long time before. But web search, of course, is just a function calling of some potential web search tool, like the SERP API or Tavily, like we typically use in our classes. And then, of course, there's the computer use stuff that we will get into later in this series. So we can kind of see how all of this is starting to come together in the year of agents. So Wiz, I'd like to just have a quick discussion to round out this Responses API piece. So system user assistant. Oh, I'm sorry. I should say developer user assistant. This is the gold standard today. Is that right?
Certainly when working with the Responses API, it's the only thing that exists realistically. If you're using something like, say, GPT OSS, which is, the open source model, which still uses the Harmony prompt template, right?
Yeah.
Which is used for the Responses API. If you pass in a system prompt, it just gets automatically converted to a developer prompt on the back end. So certainly for our OpenAI models, developer prompt is the one you should be using.
Okay. And if people go and they build stuff with open source models, they're probably going to still see this system user assistant language for quite some time, maybe forever. I mean, forever is a long time in the age of AI, but like this is specifically for OpenAI tooling today. It's not something that's seen broad adoption of the new terminology throughout industry.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't yet harmonized on the Harmony prompt format as an industry.
However, people will say in their docs, we're using the OpenAI chat completions API format, and it will still not say developer. It'll say system. So,
and I think that's an important piece, right? Because we do want to distinguish between the chat completions endpoints that we're kind of been used to up till now, and then the Responses API, right? The Responses API is a is like a newer, updated version of that chat completion, a better version of the API. And I imagine we'll slowly see the industry walk toward it. It is a good format. It is useful. It helps us do stuff we care to do. But you know, takes a little while for everything to pick up. So for now, you know, developer is what we want to think about if we're in the OpenAI ecosystem, most certainly over system prompt. And interestingly, there is still a system prompt, of course, right? But the system prompt now has moved up an echelon of power, right? It's more powerful, and it's more aligned with what you'd expect a system prompt. It's about the system. It's not about the interactions. It's about the system itself. Like, when was it created? What day is it? What is the model? These things that describe the actual system, right? As opposed to describing like some functionality that we desire or some instructions that we want. So I do think actually the naming of the new prompt as the developer prompt, that's the prompt we, the developer, give to the model. I do think it makes more sense from an intuitive perspective. Certainly the system prompt makes more sense when it describes the system.
That's right. Like when we go to system settings on our Mac. Okay. All right. So I'd like to take a moment to just, if we could, just maybe wax poetical here for a moment. Okay. So we can look back and we could say, okay, 2023 to 2025. And we see the chat completions, and it sort of took off, and it gets this, great adoption by the industry, sort of sets the gold standard. And, then we come out with this assistance API. I think everybody was talking about virtual assistants at the time, right? And then the sort of new tools for building agents. This is the responses API. We're sort of focused all about agents. Now everybody's calling the AIs agents, not assistants. Like, what do you notice when you look back over the last couple of years, from even pre-chat completions API, from a developer perspective? Like, what are you taking away from, if we could just take a moment here just to consider, what's worth taking away as we head into this new paradigm in this new series?
Consider the following, right? Classic Bill Nye reference for you guys out there. But so, like, I would think of it this way. I mean, when we started, our context window was a big blob we dumped stuff in, right? It was like that's what it was, and we did these things, and we came to the conclusion that, like, well, hey, it turns out we have this emergent behavior, and the emergent behavior is if I tell the model to do stuff, and then I ask a question, it'll like respect that first part during the second part, right? That's pretty cool. Maybe we should train the model to be like particularly good at that, right? And so now we move from this one blob to like, oh, maybe we have two blobs. We got our system, our old school system prompt. We have our user, prompt, and then of course whatever the LLM produces, that can be our assistant response or whatever we want to call it. And then we move forward, right? We learned more about how these tools are being leveraged. So we're like, oh, well, people are using them to make JSON blobs to call Python functions. We should like bake that in. That should be like part of the token sequences that we actually assign special meaning to during training. And then it was like, oh, well, actually, now the assistant's response, because we have this new thing called reasoning models. The assistant's response is like, we shouldn't like give the user the whole output just every time. We should like allow the UI to differentiate between those two things, because these systems no longer exist in some vacuum where it's just user inputs and gets response. So what it comes down to is, as LLMs have integrated into applications, into our application flows, as we've designed systems that can be powered by LLMs, we've therefore shifted the way that we train models, the way that we think about prompts, in order to adapt more suitably to that paradigm. And I think that is, like, you can look at the evolution of prompts, of prompt templates, and it directly maps to the evolution of how we use these things. And so it is very interesting. I do think it's an evolution that's important. This is certainly not the end of the road,
That's
right?
That's right.
But for now, it's a nice little map of kind of how we got here, and what we think to do, right? We have like the channels as part of the responses or harmony format, right? And those channels are not, the model itself has there's no use at all for those, right? Like the model itself has no, but in an application, they're extremely important and we can leverage them to great effect. And this is the idea. The model is no longer just built for this raw it's built with in mind that this sits in an application of some kind. And these applications have needs, like being able to differentiate who sees what, being able to differentiate, what instruction means what. And I think this is a great example of how we've adapted this big general technology to be a little bit better suited for what we're actually doing with big technology.
Yeah, and a little bit more, not to anthropomorphize, but like the way we have chats with each other, right? Like we don't hold every single word that was just said in our active memory and context. That's dumb, right? It's like the people that just repeat back exactly what you just said, like very annoying, right? And I think there's also this real interesting sort of almost alignment to, the way like these models and these apps we're building, they are being built to solve problems for real people. So, on some level, we want it to get in there and kind of act like we would expect it to while it's solving that problem. Okay.
Exactly.
So as we get into developer prompting of GPT-5, I just want to double back for a second. There seems to be some confusion in the chat on this. Okay, so when we say system prompt, basically this is the OpenAI owns the system, runs the system. They get to decide on the system prompt. We do not. We are developing with their system. Therefore, we're using the developer thing. This is not to be confused with the Harmony format. We've gone into detail on that in another event. Check out GPT OSS on our YouTube channel.
We can override the system prompt or certain fields of it that they have made available to us. So we can do things like update what the time is. We can do things like update what the model should be called. These kinds of things are exposed to us, but certainly it's more meant for the builders or deployers of the model.
Okay. And we'll add potential entire event on system prompt to the maybe list. Okay, thanks, Wiz. All right, here we go. Just for you, Manny. Okay, developer prompting of GPT-5. So I want to just take you back for a moment to February of 2019. GPT-2 was released, the last open source before GPT OSS from OpenAI. And we saw that these things, these models, they could learn without any explicit supervision, which means without any fine tuning, which means they could do it simply by prompting. Now, we came to sort of understand prompting as prompt engineering, maybe to ditch the engineering later. And now everybody, even average users, are prompting. And now maybe the engineers are doing more prompt engineering. This is simply giving the LM instructions in the context window. That is, it's leveraging in context learning, which of course is an idea put forth in the GPT-3 paper, this famous chart showing that with just one example put in context, one-shot learning, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 32-shot learning for bigger models, we can get very, very good results. This is the GPT-3 learning from the GPT-3 paper in May 2020. Now, since then, we've kind of codified a number of prompt engineering best practices. We want to be clear and specific in the instructions we put in context. We also used to talk about sort of providing some context, providing a role, providing a persona, providing a flavor, a vibe, a sort of place to stand. And this role or persona oftentimes, as we saw in the early days, was something like you are a helpful assistant. Or we might be doing some evaluation and we might, say, you're a teacher grading a quiz. This kind of role persona has obviously been expanded on to great effect and to great degree in the years since. And when we talk about giving inputs, we can sort of use the user assistant input output setup, providing some examples in context. This might be called few shot learning. In fact, language models are few shot learners is the title of that original paper. Moreover, we see a lot of work being done today on this chain of thought thing. Now, we used to, at a high level, tell all these kind of system prompts and models, think through step by step. And this was a prompt engineering best practice born of the chain of thought paper and this kind of series of intermediate reasoning steps that we thought was so useful, so powerful. Put a pin in that for a moment. And then moreover, the output. Of course, we talked about JSON quite a bit today already. That format being dialed in is important. And so perhaps we've learned since that prompt engineering is actually only a subset of the larger context engineering. And, since Dex put forth this new term, the industry has really adopted it. And it probably calls for a revamp and revisit of what we think of as the best practices of prompt engineering, or I should say of context engineering. Because if we look deeply at this kind of circle, we see things like state or history, things like memory, of course, structured outputs, RAG. All of this is included in context engineering. So it's not just prompts. It's not just instructions. It's also stuff the LLM wasn't trained on. It's also using tools and calling functions. And remember, when we got the Responses API released, it's talking about as model capabilities continue to evolve. This will provide the more flexible foundation. And so what do we mean when we say model capabilities have continued to evolve? Well, if we consider the 4 primary best practices of prompt engineering, we've kind of added this part that makes the agent good. The agentic reasoning, the reasoning piece, the searching and researching. When I go and I find a bunch of stuff and I need to put it back in context, and I find other stuff and I want to put it back in context, how am I doing that? Am I just dumping everything I find on every web page back into context, as we just sort of alluded to? No. And moreover, it's not just reasoning during an agentic search. It's also reasoning in terms of, well, how do I even decide or reason when to select a reasoning or non-reasoning model? Some of this stuff we don't have access to exactly the way OpenAI might decide on auto versus instant or thinking. But all this kind of leads to August 7th last month. GPT-5 came out and OpenAI released the GPT-5 prompting guide. Prompting tips to maximize the quality of model outputs derived from all of our great experience. Now, there's this interesting idea that they talked about, which is called agentic workflow predictability. First of all, if adopting GPT-5 for agentic and tool calling flows, we recommend Responses API off the cuff, where reasoning is persisted between tool calls. That's very interesting. There's a lot of nuanced agentic things we want to keep in mind. For instance, there's this idea of eagerness, of agentic eagerness. So we can think of our agent application architectures, these agentic scaffolds, as being able to span a very wide spectrum of control. And we've talked about this before on this channel, talking about workflows versus agents. But essentially, some systems you might want to delegate the vast majority of decision-making to the model, while others, not so much. You don't really want to give the model that kind of autonomy, that sort of agency. You might want to make it more of a programmatic workflow or even put a human in the loop. Now, there's a lot to this guide. And so, Wiz, I'd love for you to just comment on this, and we'll encourage everybody to read this on their own following the demo today and our introductory sessionino. But there's things like agentic eagerness, tool preambles, taking tool calls and tool descriptions to the next level. Not just reasoning or non, but low, medium, high reasoning. And then, of course, there's this idea of sort of transmitting context and memory sort of more selectively across conversation threads or between different agents or between different models within one conversation, or maybe meta conversation is the right word here. How do you see prompting changing in today's paradigm versus a chat completions paradigm?
It's just a lot more effort that's needed to kind of lock in these like golden prompts, right? And I mean, there's a number of ways you can approach this. There's a number of ways that you can think about this. We're going to talk about one of the ways we can do this, in the demo. But I mean, at the end of the day, the prompt is like more powerful now to use like just kind of like meme language, right? The model's better at instruction following. It's better at following more complex instructions. It's better at so many different things that we used to have to kind of work around, and now we don't have to. It's way better at handling like this big glut of context, right? And so for all of these reasons, it allows us to be more versatile. It allows us to produce better applications, but it comes at the cost of more effort. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can think about prompting and how to optimize prompting, and should we use processes like DISP and go to the kind of automated prompt optimization through some kind of framework, or should we just be like handcrafting, tinkering, prompt diffing? All these questions are great, but at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the prompt is able to do more. It is therefore more complex. It is therefore going to be more important to nail. There's some fuzziness here where it's easier to nail because it follows instructions so good, right? But at the end of the day, the way that you're constructing prompts has to change. The way you think about prompting the machine has to change. OpenAI does a great job, by the way, telling you how to do this, like quote unquote best.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have to guess, but you do have to read it. You have to become familiar with how to prompt this beast, right? It's just part of the learning curve of these models now.
Yeah, it's almost like prompt engineer is becoming like a real job or something, right? Like as the sort of system architecture complexity sort of expands, the importance of the prompt to guide that, the developer prompt to guide the whole thing and keep it on relative rails becomes sort of an art in and of itself. Like it's like prompt engineering is not what it once was. And maybe we need a new word for it, but it's more important than ever, right?
It is that. Yes, it is. Prompting hasn't become less important over time, right? And I think this is like a trap people can fall into because the model's so much better. It's going to like take up, the slack or whatever of our prompts, but in reality, it just means we're leaving more on the table. We're leaving this this potentially very powerful thing on the table. Great question in chat is like, how is this manifested, right? Programmatically,
right? By a prompt mage,
by a prompt mage, I mean, easily. Like the program part, the building of the system part is not where the artistry and engineering needs to occur. It's very straightforward. There are parameters that we can tap into that help us do this. It's combining these things in a way that works really well. That is where this artistry exists.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've yapped enough today. It's time to get to the demo. Wiz, you're going to show us what we need to know to be able to build the core of what will become our very own AI Makerspace ChatGPT using the Responses API. Take it away. It's yours.
All right. So this is going to be a very brief introduction to the OpenAI Responses API. We're not going to talk about how to, add web search or anything like this. This is coming down the pipeline. We're just going to talk about how we can actually use the real responses API and how it's different. So we have, of course, a collab for this. We have to pass an OpenAI API key, classic. We have to instantiate a client, classic. This client is going to be how we effectively power ChatGPT, right? Because this is the client that lets us have access to all of the fun models we'll eventually be stapling together. And of course, you can just use it. We know this. We've done this before. You tell the model, you ask it a question, you get a response. Hopefully this is not not new stuff. Things we get because we're living in the reasoning world, though, are access to things like the reasoning efforts of low, medium, high, and secretly minimal. The idea here being, right, we get to tell our responses API, like, how much effort should we put into thinking? And though the names are kind of loosely defined, their function is clear. Low, medium, and high. You can expect that you'll get more reasoning tokens produced with high than you would with medium, than you would with low. Then we have instructions. Instructions are like the developer prompt. Now, this is a mind trip because, of course, instructions are only going to be applied to exactly this, what you see here, response. We alternatively have, of course, the developer role. Now, the developer role, you'll notice, is going to be taken into consideration for as long as we continue to include it in our quote-unquote memory or our chat history. So the way I'd encourage people to think about this is, for like one-off instructions, we use the instructions. For an instruction we wish to persist across the entire user interaction, we're going to use the developer role, right? So instructions are one-off. Developer role stays for as long as we keep showing the LLM it. There you go. Very cool. Okay. Then, of course, also we ask it to talk like a wizard. It does talk like a wizard. You get it. Okay, there we go. We've seen this before. Structured responses. This is extremely important. This is a lot of how the world works right now, right? So when we ask it, hey, extract the event information, and then we say, Alice and Bob are going to the AI Engineering Bootcamp kickoff on September 9th at 7 p.m., totally unrelated to what we're doing here, but the registration for that closes Tuesday, September 9th at noon Eastern Daylight Time. Pardon the plug. You'll notice that we want it extracted in this format. You'll notice as well, this is just a Pydantic model, and we can just pass it in to our responses API, and we get out a formatted response with those fields filled, right? This is the kind of thing that really allows us to make sure we're thinking about things like state, that we're thinking about things like how we can use this in an application. Again, when we talk about these systems settling into an application, this is exactly what we mean. And then, of course, it's not just text, right? All of the models are omni models, which means that they take in images as well. So we can ask things like, describe the visual appearance of the people in this image. These guys, let's see what it says. Person on the left, adult man, light complexion, short hair, face, stubble. Person on the right, adult man with hair pulled back and a short goatee mustache. I'll take it. Okay. This is the idea, though, right? It's not just text anymore. Now it's also images. No one, how many times have you been in this situation? The terminal gives you an error. You're not going to copy and paste the text. You're just going to screenshot the error and throw it in ChatGPT, right? I know that in our class, that's a favored pattern of people. And so this is the way we can do it. This is the way we're going to wind up building it out. And then streaming, we all know streaming, but also streaming of structured responses. So when we have this base model and we ask the model to, I think it's still going. Yeah. You'll be able to see that it's actually going to spit out in order, right? It's going to give us in order these fields, which means that we can start work right away, right? If we want a trigger event to happen as soon as a field is done, like let's say attributes, right? we don't have to wait for the rest of the response. We can automatically start that process, and that's going to mean our application feels more responsive, feels better to use, and users will be big happy. All of this is just the Responses API. And then, of course, if you really miss 4.0, here are some settings that get you a feeling of 4.0 back. We put the reasoning effort to minimal, and we put the verbosity to low. And the model, despite being GPT-5, feels more 4.0e. So if you really missed it, if you're really sad about it, this is a way you can recreate it with the API, thanks to the Responses API. Secondly, we have this. This is our prompt optimizer for GPT-5. So OpenAI produced this. It's a good resource. Basically, the idea here is that it lets you take this original prompt. You're a helpful assistant. You encourage people to be their best selves. You are nice and not rude. You are a bombastic personality. You can click optimize. And it gives you something that's going to work a little bit better with the model, right? You can use feedback to you can use this prompt template. So we can say, make it so it's bombastic though, and we can have that included in our prompt, right? This is part of the prompting guide with things like meta prompting, right? So the ChatGPT-5 is good at making prompts for GPT-5. This is something we should exploit the heck out of, right? If we want the best prompts, we should use the model to help us make the best prompts. As well, the prompting guide gives you a ton of information about how to maximize what you need to do. You're going to notice this pattern, right, of XML instead of JSON. Very nice, very, very useful, very good way to start using these prompts. If you take one like prompting tip from the guide, it's please use XML, right? It's just better than using a markdown format for your prompts. And that's about it. I mean, this is the engine that's going to drive eventually our experience of our own homebrewed ChatGPT, right? Everything through this client and most things through that Responses API. This is how we get to tools. This is how we get to things like web search. This is how we get to things like agents. All of it is going to be powered by this nice little core right here. There you go. We're here every Wednesday. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell notification. We love doing these events. We're going to do a lot of these ones. And so excited to do those for you guys. And with that, I'll send you back to Greg.
All right, Wiz. So we've got quick wrap to do. But first, since we don't really have a ton of time and we don't have a ton of questions in the chat here, for the next event, what do people have to look forward to? They've got RAG and connectors. And so the way that this is going to interface with the Responses API, can you give us a quick flavor for that?
I don't think so. No.
Easy.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down RAG from first principles, and then we're going to talk to people about how to exactly integrate the things they see on the user interface, but on the back end first.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I think the idea is that this Responses API is like the entry point.
That's right.
And its depth is overwhelming, right? So we're gonna get into it, but we're gonna ease ourselves in so that we're not seeing 7,000 new APIs per event. We want to make sure that we're doing this in a way where we can leave being able to build each component, right? Yeah. But by itself, so that it's useful for you, even if you never watch a different event, which we hope you do.
That's right. And so if people have questions about going deeper on things, please smash the chat, smash the YouTube comments. We know Manny wants a system prompt event. We'll see if anybody else cares. Shout out to Manny and the whole crew for joining us today. Thanks, Wiz. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for joining us and for joining Wiz for his demo of the Responses API. Today, we learned about the history of the Responses API, from chat completions through function calling, JSON mode, through the switch over to developer, from system user assistant, adding tools in the Assistants API, adding even more tools, more agentic stuff in the Responses API. And we will continue this series from here. Remember, prompt engineering is dead. Long live prompt engineering. I guess I should call it context engineering now. Stay in buzzword compliance, everybody. It turns out prompting is more important than ever, and it's slightly different and more nuanced than ever. That doesn't mean you should go out and try to get a prompt engineer job tomorrow, though. So thanks so much for joining us for this event at AI Makerspace. We're here every Wednesday. Next week, we're covering part 2. And if you're still with us on the stream, I'd like you to know that we are on a mission to create the world's leading community for people like you who want to build, ship, and share production LLM applications. Our Discord and our events are filled with really cool, really competent AI engineers, data scientists, and tinkerers. So come join us in the space. If you are looking to accelerate your LLM application development, we have one more cohort before the end of the year. It's cohort 8, and it kicks off next Tuesday. It's going to be a banger. And if you're looking to upskill, you're looking to hit the ground running in 2026, this can get you where you want to go in a really community-supported, accountable environment that so many learners need. If not, just keep joining our How to Build ChatGPT live streams, and you'll get where you're trying to go in no time. And with that, thanks so much for joining us for another weekly Wednesday event. We'll see you next week for part 2, RAG and connectors, how to build ChatGPT. The journey has begun. We look forward to seeing you at each step along the way. Until next time, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll do the same. See you soon.
But Greg, how do they get started building, shipping, and sharing?
Getting started is the hardest part, like it was for you and for me. You can get started with the AI Engineer Challenge, and you can share it in the Build, Ship, Share channel on Discord. Links in the description. What if they want to accelerate their ability?
Well, we actually have a 10-week intensive bootcamp where you learn to build, ship, and share production-ready LLM applications every single week.
The AI Engineering Bootcamp, cohort starting soon. We'll have you building, shipping, and sharing
like a legend
in no time. We'll see you in class.